Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to Comic Book Wednesdays. This is an epic comic book collaboration between Micheal K Vaughan and myself, combining the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to waste a little bit of your time talking about comic books every Wednesday. Part of the illicit fun of Comic Book Wednesdays for a lot of you, I won't name names here, you know who you are, is waiting for Micheal and I to disagree. Because although Micheal and I have both read a large number of comic books, his taste is deplorable and mine is well known to be perfect. And as a result, sometimes, since he's doing the picking, we're not trading off. He's picking what we talk about every week. Sometimes we disagree, and then the fireworks fly. And before we find out whether or not we're disagreeing this week, as he mentions in his, I'll leave a link to his video down below. There's also a little bit of extra comic book related business. Because Micheal K Vaughan is joining Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and he's joining me and Matthew for a comic book read-along in April. So Micheal and I will still be doing our Comic Book Wednesdays, but in addition to that, there'll be a 3-person Mayberry Book Club reading this, Avengers Forever, which was a 12-issue series of Avengers comics that came out about 30 years ago. That was Matthew's idea. It was Matthew's idea to read this. This is written by Kurt Busiek with a great deal of editorial help from Roger Stern and drawn by Carlos Pacheco. And it is the ultimate love letter to longtime in-the-weeds, liner note reading Avengers fans. And it is completely incomprehensible to anyone who is not that. Completely incomprehensible. Matthew insisted. I warned him, and he said he was having a hair-tossing diva moment and bought a copy for himself. He insists that we're going to read this 3 chapters a week in April. And he's not going to understand a single word of what he's reading, and neither are you if you haven't been reading the Avengers and studying them criminology style from the very beginning. So I thought I would throw my voice in with Micheal K Vaughan's that we are indeed, all 3 of us, embarked on reading this thing in April, in addition to whatever comics Micheal and I talk about. But I'm afraid those of you who are watching from the cheap seats hoping for bloodshed, they're not going to get it this week. Micheal picked a great thing this week, a great thing. He had a little bit of ranting to do, and so do I. And in this rare instance, not only are we in total sync about the quality of the comic involved, we're also in total sync about the rant. For today, Micheal picked the Joe Kubert illustrated Tarzan adventures. This is Dark Horse Archives because for a long time Dark Horse had the rights to Tarzan, and they did a great job. A great job, not just reprinting Joe Kubert's issues from his DC years, but also with their own Tarzan runs, their own Tarzan miniseries, none of which have ever been collected in volumes as far as I know. All with different artists, lots of big, different stories, utterly incredible original stuff, not adaptations of traditional Tarzan stories. I think that was Dark Horse that did that. For years, I used to eagerly wait. In whatever comic shop, whatever LCS I was patronizing at the time, I would make sure to tell them, this might not be on your normal buy list, but I love these things. I guarantee you I will buy every issue that comes out of any of this company's production of Tarzan. I don't know off the top of my head if it was Dark Horse. I think it was. And I also don't know who currently has the rights to Tarzan. As far as I know, there is no Tarzan comic currently being made. There is a kind of John Carter of Mars comic. It's mostly about the super scientist and martial artist Dejah Thoris. Because it's 2022, and Dejah Thoris don't need no man. It wouldn't surprise me if the people who have the rights to do those John Carter knockoffs might be willing to do Tarzan as well and just don't. Because what is Tarzan, right? It's the adventures of a white man in darkest Africa who often bosses around whole tribes of natives. Often the ones that don't hate him consider him to be Bwana and obey him. And he's not just a white guy, he's an actual British aristocrat. in the political environment of the 21st century, I'd be amazed if anybody ever did Tarzan again. Maybe somebody is, and I just don't know about it. These were not originally Dark Horse issues. These originally came out from DC Comics. DC Comics got the right to do Tarzan and John Carter of Mars, which they also did, and a whole bunch of other things too. DC Comics also spun off a comic starring Korak, the son of Tarzan. And a lot of those issues had Joe Kubert covers. He never, as far as I know, did any of the interior artwork, but a lot of the interior artwork was pretty good. I think Murphy Anderson did a couple of issues that were well done. Static in the way that he is, but well done. And there were some others. DC ought to collect those Korak issues. They were quite good. But when it comes to DC and what they ought to collect, Michael's rant in his video is entirely right. What on earth? What on earth causes DC Comics to be so bad at their own reprint culture? Why haven't they caught on to the money that's out there, just waiting, that Marvel has caught on to? Why haven't they done that? I have no idea. No matter who currently owns the rights to Tarzan, DC Comics has billions of dollars in its war chest, in its coffers. They could certainly put out a big $150 anthology of all of the Joe Kubert years of Tarzan. They could certainly do that, and they don't. Micheal K Vaughan mentions Sergeant Rock, which Joe Kubert also illustrated, a great war comic set in World War II that DC has never collected. He also mentioned Enemy Ace, which is a great World War I comic that Joe Kubert illustrated that DC has never reissued. He mentioned the great revamp of Hawkman that Joe Kubert illustrated with Gardner Fox. Those issues are incredible. The artwork alone is like a sonnet. It's so beautiful. And there is no big volume. And if DC did that, they would recoup their money in about 5 seconds. To any of those. They'd recoup their money in about 5 seconds. Instead, these things are scattered all over creation. Instead, it took 25, 30 years of concerted effort to get them to grudgingly start reprinting the Legion of Superheroes, which is the most vocal fan base of any comic book creation, DC or Marvel, anywhere in the world. In other words, with the Legion of Superheroes, you know perfectly well you're going to sell what you print. And still DC didn't do it. Just, maybe next year, maybe 10 years from now. Anyway, okay, I've got my rant out of the way. This was from 50 years ago, these Joe Kubert issues, where they got the rights to Tarzan and decided to start it off with issue number 1, which I have. I have this first issue in a long box here in fairly good condition. I have the first, I think, 30 issues of these that I've just kept in a box and moved all around and never bothered to get rid of. I don't know how I could get rid of them now anyway. They're in good enough shape to read, but they're not in good enough shape to sell to any kind of a comic shop that buys back issues. Not that I would, but it's better to have them in digital form because then you can pinch the artwork. You can zoom in and see the detail that Joe Kubert definitely put there. He drew these things on a big easel. They were reduced for comic book size. But this was issue number 1, and it takes us through the origin story of Tarzan from the novel. See, where there are the Claytons who are just abandoned on the African coast. There's a pirate pirates overtake their ship and they are set ashore. And they have to make a life for themselves. Tarzan's father says, "Take heart, dearest. If our ancestors could survive such a land, so may we." Your ancestors didn't survive such a land, but that's okay. They build a rude house, and it is visited at night by an enormous lion. And they build a better house, and it is visited by a strange ape-like creature. Very good that Joe Kubert remembers that Edgar Rice Burroughs is pretty clear that the apes that raised Tarzan are not gorillas, that they're something else. The Mangani are something else. They're in between man and gorilla. This is, I want to show you an example of how gorgeous this is. The action splits to the apes in the forest, where an ape named Kala loses her baby. See, there she is. Joe Kubert has seen enough documentaries to know what gorillas or large apes do. They often feel or fondle the dead body. That's incredibly good. I mean, that's just incredibly good. Look at how much is done with how little. uh, Kala loses her baby and therefore naturally wants another one. And look at this. Look at these three panels here, where they make their way to the cabin and just show up at the door. How wonderful that is, right? Kubert is taking his time. He shows us them seeing it from afar, the gorgeous sun and the trees in the foreground there. Then he shows us them approaching. Then he shifts to the inside, and we just see them showing up at the door. And Tarzan's father tries to fight them, but Kala steals off with the baby. And the door is locked, and years pass. The baby grows up. And he notices, here's a great scene with a friend of his. He notices that he doesn't look like his friend. His skin is smooth. They don't look the same at all. They clearly aren't the same because he has no problem using tools. And eventually, in the silliest part of Tarzan of the Apes, the original novel, he goes back to his old cabin and teaches himself how to read, which would take about 90 years, but that's okay. While he is discovering his heritage, he's also realizing that he can hold his own, that he has been raised as one of these creatures and can fight them on their own terms. And that's what we see in these first issues. I think it's the first 3 issues where we get Tarzan's origin recounted, where he looks through the children's books and sees, a picture of a man, a picture of a lion, that sort of thing, and starts to wonder about himself. He starts to realize that he is not an ape. He's not one of his own tribe. He's some other tribe of ape. He's something else again. Wonderfully done. Just beautifully rendered. Look at that. Look at that storm on the savannah there. That is just amazing. Just amazingly done. Same thing here, the way it buffets everybody like that. Where there's no hurry to tell the story. Kubert was clearly told that he could tell this story in many issues, and so he does. And in the course of this second issue, Tarzan's ape mother, Kala, is killed. A very famous panel that Kubert did where he finds his dead mother and he exacts revenge on the human who does it. And then these stories just continue with beautiful, fluid artwork by Joe Kubert. Let's get another issue here. And there he is. There's Tarzan fighting an Arab on horseback, and with the great Kubert learned his trade at the same place that John Romita Sr. or Jack Kirby did, where you have to know how to draw swords, you have to know how to draw guns, ships, cars, especially horses. Westerns were big. You had to know how to draw your horses. You couldn't do what passes for this today. God forbid that a current Marvel comic writer would have to have a horse in a comic. God knows what it would look like. But here, I want to show you an example here of a little tribute. There's a great issue here. I loved getting this on the newsstand. I wonder if it's going to explain. Okay, no, it's not. But you'll be able to see it anyway. It's this. The ape man enters the mines of hell. And what you get is that you get a standard opening there for a Joe Kubert story. There's Tarzan in the forest watching what's going on. But when he is brought to the mines of hell, you suddenly notice that is Joe Kubert. But this is very much not. That is not Joe Kubert. That is Russ Manning. And you get that all throughout this issue. And it's a little acknowledgement, a little doff of the hat to the fact that Tarzan, unlike many other characters that we've talked about in Comic Book Wednesday, has been very fortunate with his artists all throughout. Oh, look at that, fighting an abominable snowman. How incredible. Just incredible. Classic Kubert artwork. Tarzan has been very fortunate with his, look at that, with his artists. You have Hal Foster, the artist who became famous for Prince Valiant. You have Bernie Hogarth, just doing absolutely gorgeous work, just absolutely gorgeous. And also Russ Manning, who is a little bit stiff, but who I believe has Dark Horse anthology volumes of his own. But wouldn't it be nice if all of this artwork were given the treatment that it's due? A little bit odd, a a little bit ironic for me to be calling for enormous hardcover volumes when I mock them so much. But I only mock them because Micheal K Vaughan has a $150, 1,000-pound omnibus of literally everything. A U.S. trucker. He has all of it. He has Night Mask. Whereas I would be selective. I would be selective in my $150 anthologies. But a big fat anthology of Joe Kubert. Look at these. Look at this artwork. Look at how gorgeous that is. Just a single throwaway panel, but look at how beautifully that's done. Just gorgeous. Here, these two characters are fighting. They're arguing with each other, but they're in the background. Just lovely. Like I mentioned, it's so much done with so little, and it runs all throughout these issues. These ought to be... Oh, there's Tarzan fighting a blonde lion. These issues ought to be commemorated. They ought to have the kind of commemoration that they're due. And the same thing is true with Russ Manning's Tarzan, which really ought to be in one big volume instead of all of the little fugitive volumes that I think exist. I'm pretty sure that there is no central collection of Bernie Hogarth Tarzan, even though those issues are absolutely gorgeous. I have one oversized commemorative issue of his artwork, but nothing like the whole of it. Hal Foster Tarzan, you Tarzan fans out there, you could tell me, does Hal Foster's Tarzan get reprinted at all? Is there any reprint of it? It's a shame, in other words, that we're letting all of this stuff go. That the reprint culture is out there, and it is proven that it can make you your money. I don't know why the copyright holders for all of this stuff don't wise up to that. I really don't. Especially since current on the newsstand floppy issues of single comics are notoriously underperforming. They are tanking. To the extent that Marvel and DC have openly floated the idea of simply not publishing Superman or Spider-Man anymore because they're losing money on every issue. That doesn't happen with the preprints at all. Micheal K Vaughan is entirely right. If DC Comics came out with a $125 hardcover omnibus of Sergeant Rock, for instance, not a series that I particularly love, but a beautifully done thing, if they came out with that omnibus, it isn't just freaks like Micheal K Vaughan who would buy it. Lots of people would buy it. It would become instantly collectible. It would sell out. DC would make their money back. Marvel seems to get that. There's not a week goes by when they don't have multiple reprint volumes, paperback and hardcover. DC doesn't seem to get that, and as a result, we have to go foraging when we talk about something like the Joe Kubert run on Tarzan. We often talk on Comic Book Wednesdays about runs, about what that is, what that actually means. And that is when you are aware, when you're buying things, I was buying these things on the newsstand, and I was aware that I was seeing a truly great rendition of this character. And it went on, issue after issue after issue. There are 3 volumes in this Dark Horse archive that I know of. It's a shame that we have to go so scattershot for the great runs of a lot of these things. That's a pity. That should not be true. But for today, well, boy, I had never seen before the 1-volume big Dark Horse paperback that Michael held up in his video. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that it's not new. And if our Comic Book Wednesdays are any indication, then that paperback volume that he holds up and waves around in his video is probably eye-wateringly expensive now. Probably hugely collectible. You could check it out and see. If it's not, if you're a Tarzan fan and you've never seen the Joe Kubert realization of this character, you really, really should. You really should, because they're amazing. Absolutely amazing. My favorite issue of the whole Joe Kubert run is an issue called The Orphan. Just a one-and-done story, not canonical to Tarzan, but beautiful. Just plain beautiful. Not just the artwork, but the realization of the character. So, this week, Michael and I are in complete synchronicity. Not only with how great these issues are, but with how crappily their caretakers are handling them. These should be available in a big, nice archival hardcover if you want to put on the shelves of your stately manor. They should be available, and they're not. But maybe someday. Anyway, who knows what we'll do next week? But this week, a home run out of the park. The Joe Kubert run on Tarzan. How amazing. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back next week, and we'll see what Michael subjects us to then. We still have one more week before we embark on Avengers Forever, on Avengers Never. Until then, who knows what we'll encounter. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.